Hello there everybody! A little bit ago I made a video where I went over my character design process and I mentioned a few things that I wanted to improve on. Mainly, I wanted to learn to reiterate my designs, push proportions, and my shape language. Well, it's time to fix those problems. In this video, I will be designing a lot of characters for a dreamlike mystery game that I call Delirium, and it's been bouncing around in my head for a little while now. So I wanted to do a very quick lineup sketch just to get the general idea of a few of the characters and what I wanted to work on for them. First in the lineup is the tall lady. I want her to feel intimidating and elegant, almost sweet, but with that hidden edge. I picture her as the first character you meet when you play as Fitz, who is the man next in line with the blonde hair. And he is our terrified main character that you possess to solve some mysteries. The whole idea of Delirium is very much in development, and I'm mostly throwing out a lot of ideas and maybe someday stuff will stick. But I do know that I want a lot of interesting and almost uncanny dreamlike NPCs for you to meet. Which is why I figured, since this is a slightly more cartoony styled world that I'm planning, I figured it would be a good way to kind of dip my toes into helping me with my character designs and pushing things, because when things are in a cartoon or more stylized, it will be easier to push those proportions because you're not adhering to conventional rules of reality. Anyways, next, the Faceless girl is one of many faceless people, but she will be a buddy to Fitz, and the rest are really just a random assortment of characters. There's the little faceless girl, and since it's a mystery game, I figured that it would make sense to have an officer you could talk to, and I think a mail system could be really interesting, like you get news and evidence through the mail. Yeah, really just random characters. And, overall, I think the characters are fine, but not yet iconic and strong. Part of that is probably due to this was very rushed on purpose. I really just wanted to get a general idea. But anyway, once I was done with that, I wanted to move on to a guy who's been living in my head for a while, the Roseman. Since Delirium is a dream-esque world along the lines of Alice in Wonderland, that at least it has a similar vibe in the dream uncanny department. I would say that, aesthetic-wise, it's not that similar. It has a more early 1900s, late 1800s, rainy, whimsy vibe. But I want there to be a lot of interesting and whimsical NPCs that don't make sense in the real world. The Roseman would be one of those NPCs that you meet while exploring the world, and you would probably speak to him or interrogate him in case he has any news regarding your latest mystery. I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted one rose on his face or a whole bouquet, but something that I did know I wanted to do was to make his shirt collar look like the bouquet holder part, the paper around the flowers. I really don't know what that thing is supposed to be called, but something like that. And I'm taking most of my inspiration for all of Delirium, but it's prevalent here. I'm taking a lot of my inspiration and reference material from the Edwardian and Victorian eras, which I know that's a really large span of time, but I don't want to feel too boxed in by adhering to some specific era, and I don't think it would be feasible to properly represent them in the cartoonish style I'm going to be using. I will say, though, that for the Roseman, I really liked the look of some 1920s suits on him, which is a little past the Edwardian era, but like I said, I'm not sticking too closely, mostly just gathering a little inspiration. But the main difference from them being that A, I took off the jacket, and B, I gave him a more rectangular silhouette. One problem I had with him is that there are so many subtle changes that you can add or take away when it comes to like suits that it's really hard to try them all in interesting ways. And then of course I had to add the colors that add to the problem, but in all honesty they were pretty straightforward. I knew I was going to go red for the roses and would use gray, white, and black for his suit. After making all this, I think that I like the center full body one, but with a few tweaks to the colors, which you'll see in the finished lineup. Next, I drew concepts for the tall lady. She was actually the first Delirium character I came up with. Of course, at the time it wasn't called that, but, you know, fun trivia for no reason. Anyways, like I said, she will be the first NPC the player meets, and I want her to be imposing but not outright threatening, which turned out to be a hard balance. Of course, she's faceless, as are most people in Delirium, and has a hat to further obscure her face. I also did a few versions where she has a sketched on mouth, which, depending on where the story goes, might be interesting to add, or just something to make her a little more mysterious compared to the rest of the characters who do not have mouths, at least the faceless characters. But the main thing I was working on was the dress. I took inspiration from Edwardian Gibson girls for the most part, but I also tried out a few walking dress types, and I don't know what you would call them, like, is it tea dress or garden party dress? I don't know, pretty dresses. I took inspiration from pretty dresses, basically. I wanted mostly triangles for her shapes, but again, I don't want her to come off as outright villainous or threatening because she's not. So I ended up trying to balance it with more circular shapes because it was just a little too edgy, literally edgy, I guess. Once I had those sketches done, I moved on to more refined designs. And I had one of the most annoying predicaments a character designer could be in, at least in my opinion. I thought that they all looked really good. The first one was the closest to my original concept for her, with a puffy white blouse and a dark skirt. The second, I used some Victorian dresses as reference and drew a wide hat. I'm not sure what they're called. I don't know the terminology of a lot of things. I just know that they look cool. But it also had a veil. Most of the ones I saw had a fully encompassing veil, but I didn't want a fully encompassing veil, so I didn't do that. And while I like it, I think it's the least fitting for her personality. The third one I also really like. It feels the most shapely. It was also close to some of my original concepts. And lastly, the fourth was much like the first, but I used a trumpet-shaped skirt instead. And once I was done drawing them, I had to make a decision. At first, I decided on the first one, but I wanted to change the sleeves up a bit, and then I got indecisive and got the third one out, but changed the hat to make her look less like a villainess, and then I continued to adjust the first one. Classic. While the finished product looks nice, and I do like it, I think I may try to adjust proportions to make things a little more dramatic and angular, and I don't know, I think the hat is just a little too round. I think that there could be something else there that would also work really well. Alright, so we are finally drawing the main character, Fitz. He is a terrified and traumatized, a guy who is thrown into delirium for unknown reasons and is then charged with investigating a string of mysteries. I want him to look jittery and a little wimpy, someone who, when you play as him, feels scared of what's around him. While I already had a pretty good idea of what I wanted him to look like, blonde, black pants, one visible eye, and a flowy poet's shirt, I did a few new iterations just to be sure. I really liked all of them, and I may tweak some of these for other characters in the future, but I guess I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. I made one with a more elegant vibe, with brown hair and a fully collared shirt. And to me, he looks like some sort of deranged heir in that one. The only one I have with 2 eyes and black hair does sell that I'm a scaredy cat look, but also feels a little basic. I just don't think I was feeling the black hair. And then I did Fitz in all black clothing and with more grayish brown. I guess it was more gray than brown gray hair. And I really like this look, and it's probably the most likely to be reused in some way. The reason I didn't end up with this one is because I think the black makes him a little more serious and capable. He almost looks more threatening. And part of that could be the stance, but I think that the lighter colors lend to that pathetic look more. So you may be thinking that these sketches were a waste since I went with my OG design in the end, right? Not quite. In the end, I did settle on something similar to his OG, but with a few changes. Mainly, I added ruffles to the end of his sleeves, and the collar is also now ruffled. This makes it look a little bit more like a traditional poet's shirt that I think are buttoned up or laced, perhaps. I don't know. They're done up to the neck, usually, with ruffles. And it also adds a little more softness to his design, and I think the droopy sleeve ends make him look more pathetic. Man, I'm kind of roasting him right now. Once I decided on that one, I made a quick sketch of his remade design. Very simple. I'm not gonna harp on it for too long, but I quite like it. Now we will move on to the faceless girl and the faceless child. For this sheet, I wanted to make interactions while reiterating my designs. Now, the faceless girl I also made before Fitz and Delirium in general, but I still wanted to change up the design in a few ways. For one, I feel like it looks a little too much like my persona, which honestly she still does at the end of this, but you know, I'm trying. I can't help it if I look so great. Anyways, Faceless Girl will be Fitz's friend and a possible key, basically something that helps the character get to other places in the game, not necessarily an actual key. Sometimes this could be an ability or after you've done a quest. Hopefully you understand what I'm meaning. And I see her as tagging along with Fitz, especially since Fitz is such a scaredy cat. She can be there to help ground him. As for the Faceless Child, I don't have much for her. She'll probably just be an NPC you run into every once in a while and possibly question, but I can see her maybe being the Faceless Girl's younger sister or related to her in some way. After I had all the sketches done, I once again made a new canvas and worked on a finished design for the Faceless Girl, not the Faceless Child yet. I like the hair in the drawing I did with Fitz, and also the one where she was mad at the Faceless Child. But I also wanted to use the OG hair I had in mind before for one of the 3. While I liked the jacket in the third one, it was overall too dark, and the second one, I felt it didn't quite fit. So I added some ruffles and lace to the first one, and I decided that that would be my new Faceless Girl. Once done with a few of the main cast, I moved on to a few more NPC sketches and ideas for characters. First, I started on the Weeping Bride. I don't have a solid reason why she's weeping, besides her fiancé is not there for whatever reason, but I feel I need a little bit more in there. The design is fairly straightforward, but I did want to do something with her bouquet, so I tried out rose colors that I saw represented heartbreak. While I think it looks interesting, I felt the yellow made things a little less balanced, so I threw those out when I did the finished lineup. And instead, I opted for wilted red roses and black roses. I as well added a veil to obscure her face and to make her a little more different, and since the veil is there anyways, instead of kind of a black void in front of her face, I decided to put a white void in front of her face, just to keep with her color palette a little more. Okay, we're losing daylight, so I'll speedrun the next characters. I made 2 more possible finished designs for the Faceless child, and I made a painting with a Duke-type character that, in my head, can talk. Well, not in my... I think that it would be interesting if he talked. And you may be wondering why he's not faceless, but my answer to you is, what else would he have? Next, a living lamppost with a pasted-on mustache, and 3 newsboys. Well, 1 man, a teen, early teen, probably like 13, and a kid. I added them mostly because I think that a newspaper system to let you know about crimes and stuff could also be very interesting to keep track of. But it would be slightly separate from the mail system. And their design's pretty fun, just a ragtag group of newsboys. I think it's fun. I looked at Newsies for inspiration, obviously. How could I not? Alright, next, on a new canvas, I reiterated the talking portrait and also designed the policeman, who I think looks very fun, and the mailman, who will deliver personal letters from other NPCs to Fitz. And once I finished them up, it was time for the final lineup. Well, final for this video. I'm sure as the story progresses and I reiterate and revise, I'll come up with better designs in the future. But for now, this is what we have. First in the lineup is once again the tall woman with Fitz and the Faceless girl following. The tall woman's pose was a little difficult to do. I wanted something that showed off her personality and her silhouette, all while having her interact with the other characters in admittedly a small way. In the end, I think I could have done better with pushing her proportions and making her dress more angular, especially the hat. Again, I'm thinking about changing the hat a little bit. But she was really the only one I had trouble with. The others, I think, flowed pretty well, actually, from pose to pose. I wanted all of them to be interacting with at least one other characters, even if just in a small way, like the Faceless child and the Weeping Bride looking at each other. Honestly, I think my favorite little interaction bubble is between Fitz, the Faceless girl, and the Roseman. I think it gives a nice representation of what their personalities are, specifically Fitz and the Faceless girl, but you know. The only major thing I changed in the looks department was that while coloring the Roseman, I decided that a white hat would actually go very well with him. Kinda disappointed that I didn't come up with it while doing concept sketches, but as I said earlier, I was tweaking so many little things from pose to pose. It just didn't feel worth it to draw another one. This whole video, I've been trying to steer away from copy-pasting things, just because I want to get it out there and actually draw them. But, you know, in the end, I think that this was a really good exercise for me. Like I said, I've been having trouble reiterating on my designs and pushing my proportions and redrawing the character every time. So learning to iterate on my designs, and then on top of that, I made a lineup that wasn't just static T-poses like I usually do. I'd say that this was a pretty productive video for me. I wanted to get this out maybe a little sooner than I am, but that's just how we roll right now. I hope you all enjoyed this video, even though it will probably end up being a little long, but I appreciate you all for hanging around. Feel free to check out my other videos like this and my Instagram. Okay, bye.